Before we begin, just pause for a second. Close your eyes if it feels safe. Place one hand on your heart. Take one slow, deep breath in through your nose. Feel it fill your chest. Soften your shoulders. Calm your mind. Now, exhale slowly. Let any tension or expectation drift away. What if I told you that just 3 simple words used with real sincerity could leave a lasting emotional echo in someone's mind long after the conversation ends? Not because they're clever, not because they're rehearsed, but because they create a moment of genuine feeling. A moment her heart remembers even when she doesn't want to think about it. Most the psychology behind emotional triggers. People spend hours overthinking messages, trying to be funny, perfect, or impressive. But attraction isn't logical. It isn't built on effort alone. It lives in the unconscious, in the quiet feelings words can spark when they're honest, present, and emotionally real. Today, we're going to explore exactly how to create those moments. Not through games or tricks, but through authentic communication that makes someone feel truly seen, valued, and emotionally moved. These 3 words aren't magic. They're tools for deeper connection when used with integrity, timing, and respect. If this already feels important to you, take a second right now to like the video. It helps this message reach more people who want healthier, more meaningful interactions. Subscribe and turn on notifications if you want more grounded, psychology-based words, sir. One that builds curiosity content on emotional intelligence, authentic attraction, and building connections that feel real. Let's settle in. Get comfortable. This is your time to listen, reflect, and grow. There's something most people don't realize about communication. It's not the words that are remembered. It's the emotional state those words create. You can have 2 people say almost the exact same sentence, but one leaves a person feeling nothing, while the other stays in their mind for days. The difference is presence. The difference is emotional weight. The difference is whether the person speaking is actually there in the moment or just performing a script they hope will land correctly. Think about the last time someone sent you a message that actually stayed with you. Not the, "Hey, how are you?" Not the polite check-ins. The ones that made you smile at your phone or pause and feel something deeper. What made those moments different? They carried a real emotion. They painted a picture. They made you feel seen. Most daily conversations are safe, polite, and completely forgettable. "Hey, how's your day?" "Good, you?" "Fine, busy." They blend into the background noise of life. The mind doesn't record them because there's no emotional weight, no curiosity, no warmth, no vivid image to replay later. But the unconscious mind works like an artist. It sketches only the moments that matter and blurs everything else. When your words carry real feeling, curiosity, appreciation, presence, they become unforgettable. They echo in quiet moments. They appear when she's alone, when everything is still. That's emotional anchoring. A simple, "How are you?" disappears, but a sentence that sparks real emotion lingers. Now pause for a moment and consider something more personal. Have you ever had someone say something to you that you couldn't quite forget, even if you wanted to? Maybe it wasn't dramatic. Maybe it was simple. But it landed in a way that stayed. That's not coincidence. That's psychology. Human memory is deeply tied to emotion, especially emotion that feels unexpected or meaningful. When something breaks pattern, when it feels personal instead of generic, the brain flags it as important. And once it's important, it gets stored differently. It becomes easier to recall, easier to feel again. That's why certain conversations can replay in your mind even years later, while entire relationships blur into silence. And before we go deeper, I want you to take this personally for a moment, because this isn't just about dating or communication theory. It's about how you show up in human connection every single day. The way you speak, the way you listen, the way you make someone feel seen or unseen, it all adds up. And if this idea resonates with you, if you've ever wished your conversations had more depth, more meaning, more emotional impact, take a moment to comment below. Share what kind of conversations stay with you the most. The honest ones, the unexpected ones, the kind that made you feel something real. Your experience matters here because this is where awareness begins, by noticing what actually moves us as people. The mind doesn't remember perfection, it remembers emotion. Now, let's go deeper into something that will reshape how you understand attraction and communication. Sarah, host of What She Thinks YouTube channel, What we're really talking about here is not manipulation, and it's not performance. It's emotional precision. It's learning how to speak in a way that aligns what you feel internally with what you express externally. Most people never develop this skill. They either say too little and remain forgettable, or they say too much and lose authenticity. But there is a middle space, quiet, grounded, intentional communication that creates resonance without pressure. Let's break down what actually makes words emotionally impactful. First, the brain responds strongly to specificity. When someone says something general like, "You're nice," the brain processes it and quickly discards it because it contains no unique data. But when someone says, "I appreciate how you listen without interrupting. It makes me feel understood," something different happens. The brain recognizes detail. It recognizes observation. And more importantly, it recognizes effort to see the person. Second, emotional safety matters more than intensity. A lot of people think attraction is about being bold or overwhelming someone with emotion. In reality, the nervous system leans towards safety. When someone feels no pressure, no expectation, no hidden agenda, their guard lowers naturally. And in that lowered state, connection deepens without force. This is why calm, grounded communication often feels more powerful than intense or overly expressive communication. Third, timing changes everything. Even the most beautiful words can feel empty if they are delivered too early, too frequently, or without emotional context. But the same words, said at the right moment, after shared laughter, after vulnerability, after genuine presence, can land in a completely different way. Timing transforms language from information into experience. Let's bring this into something practical. Imagine you're on a date. The conversation has been flowing naturally. There's laughter, pauses, moments of eye contact that feel easy rather than forced. Instead of rushing to fill silence, you allow it to exist. And in that space, you say something simple but intentional, not rehearsed, not performed, but felt. "I want to see you again because I appreciate how calm you make everything feel." Notice what's happening there. There's no pressure, no exaggeration, no over-explaining, just clarity, just presence. The person receiving that isn't being chased or evaluated, they're being acknowledged. Now contrast that with the kind of communication most people default to. Over-texting, over-explaining, trying to secure certainty, trying to get a reaction. That energy doesn't create attraction, it creates tension. And tension without safety leads to withdrawal, not closeness. One of the most powerful psychological principles at play here is emotional congruence. This simply means your words, tone, and energy all align. If you say something meaningful, but your body language is nervous or rushed, the message weakens. But when your tone is steady, your posture open, and your intent calm, the message lands cleanly. People don't just hear you, they feel you. Let's pause and ground this into something real. Think about someone in your life whose words stayed with you. Not because they were perfect, but because they were real. What did they do differently? Did they slow down when they spoke to you? Did they actually listen instead of waiting to respond? Did they notice something about you that most people miss? That's the layer most people overlook. Impactful communication is not about vocabulary, it's about attention. And attention, when directed sincerely at another human being, becomes rare. And what is rare becomes valuable in the human mind. So when we talk about emotional resonance, we're really talking about three things working together: presence, specificity, and sincerity. When those align, even simple phrases carry weight. Even ordinary conversations become memorable. Even brief interactions can leave an imprint. But here's something important to understand before we continue deeper in part 2. None of this works if it's used as a technique detached from feeling. People are far more perceptive than we often assume. They may not consciously analyze your words, but they feel your intention. If your intention is connection, it lands one way. If your intention is influence without authenticity, it lands another. So the real shift here isn't learning what to say. It's becoming someone who actually means what they say. And that's where everything begins to change. Because once intention becomes real, your communication stops being something you do and starts becoming something you are. When someone feels that level of authenticity from you, they don't just respond to your words, they respond to your presence. There's a subtle but powerful shift that happens in how you're perceived. You stop feeling like background noise in someone's life, and instead, you become emotionally distinguishable. Not louder, not more intense, just more real. Let's go deeper into something most people misunderstand about emotional impact in conversation. It's not the perfect line that creates connection. It's the felt experience of being understood. A woman can hear dozens of compliments in a week, but the one that stays isn't the most poetic. It's the one that felt the most specific to her inner world. Something that reflects her personality, her emotional tone, the way she thinks when no one is watching. That's what creates emotional imprinting. This is where psychology becomes really important. The human brain is constantly filtering information through a question. Is this relevant to me emotionally? If the answer is no, it gets discarded. If the answer is yes, especially if it connects to identity, safety, or emotional recognition, it gets stored deeper. Not just as memory, but as emotional association. That means your words don't just communicate meaning, they create associations. If someone consistently feels seen by you, your presence becomes associated with emotional safety. If they feel judged or rushed, your presence becomes associated with tension. And those associations form the invisible foundation of attraction, trust, or distance. Now let's return to something practical again, because this is where most people get stuck. They understand the idea but not the application. Think about the phrase, "I appreciate you." On its own, it's soft, nice, but incomplete. Now imagine this instead. I appreciate how you don't rush your thoughts when you speak. It makes everything you say feel more intentional. Now we've added something crucial, observation. And observation is what transforms emotional language from generic to deeply felt. Because suddenly, you're not just expressing emotion, you're demonstrating awareness. And awareness is what people interpret as emotional intelligence. But there's another layer here that people rarely talk about, emotional pacing. When someone receives too much intensity too quickly, the nervous system can interpret it as pressure, even if the words are positive. That's why grounded communication matters more than expressive overload. You're not trying to convince someone of anything, you're allowing them to arrive at the feeling themselves. That's a subtle but powerful difference. Convincing creates resistance, allowing creates openness, and openness is where connection grows naturally. Let's look at a real-life scenario. Imagine a woman you've been talking to casually. Nothing forced, nothing rushed. You've had a few conversations that weren't just surface level, but not overly deep either. One day, instead of trying to escalate things quickly or impress her, you simply reflect something real. I like talking to you because you have a way of making simple things feel more thoughtful. No pressure, no expectation, no hidden agenda, just recognition. Now pay attention to what that does psychologically. It doesn't demand a response. It doesn't create anxiety. It doesn't push for validation. It simply lands. And in many cases, what lands softly often stays longer than what arrives loudly. This is one of the most misunderstood principles in attraction psychology. Subtlety creates depth when sincerity is present. But let's go even deeper into the emotional mechanics behind this. Human beings are wired for pattern recognition. When someone breaks your expectation in a positive way, especially in a way that feels emotionally safe, the brain flags it as meaningful. That's why rare emotional experiences stand out so strongly in memory. Most conversations follow predictable patterns, small talk to polite response to exit. But when someone introduces emotional specificity, the pattern breaks, and the brain wakes up. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's different. And difference creates memory. Now, here's where responsibility matters, because anything that creates emotional impact also carries emotional responsibility. If your words create emotional openings in someone, you have to be aware of what you're doing with that space. This is where integrity separates healthy communication from manipulation. You're not using emotional awareness to control outcomes. You're using it to deepen understanding. And if the connection isn't mutual, you don't push it. You respect it. You let it be what it is. That alone is a form of emotional maturity that most people never develop. Now let's talk about something very practical you can start doing immediately. The pause before response habit. Most people respond instantly in conversation. They try to fill silence. They try to maintain momentum. But emotionally intelligent communicators do something different. They pause just slightly longer than usual before responding. That small pause does three things. It slows down reactive speech. It increases intentionality. It makes your words feel more considered and grounded. And when your words feel grounded, they carry more weight. Not because they're louder, but because they're calmer. Now combine that with observation-based language. Instead of reacting to what someone says, you reflect what you notice about them. Noticing tone, noticing emotional shifts, noticing consistency in their personality. For example, I notice you think a lot before answering. That's rare. Most people just speak to fill space. This isn't flattery, it's reflection. And reflection creates emotional mirroring, the feeling of being seen accurately by another mind. That feeling is one of the strongest foundations of connection. But here's the deeper truth most people miss. You cannot fake being observant for long, because real observation requires presence, and presence requires emotional grounding in yourself first. If you're anxious, rushing, or seeking validation, your attention becomes distorted. You start seeing what you want to see instead of what's actually there. And people feel that distortion instinctively, which is why the real work is internal, not learning better phrases, but becoming calmer inside yourself so your attention becomes clean. When that happens, your communication changes without effort. You stop reaching. You start noticing. And when you speak from noticing rather than needing, everything you say carries a different weight. Let's bring this back into emotional reality. Think of the moments you felt most connected to someone. Was it when they were trying to impress you? Or was it when they were simply present with you, calm, attentive, not trying to force anything? That second feeling is what people remember. That is what creates emotional imprint. And that brings us to the final understanding. The goal is not to become someone who says the right things. The goal is to become someone whose presence makes others feel something real about themselves. Because when someone feels more like themselves around you, more seen, more understood, more emotionally safe, that is what they associate with you long after the conversation ends. And that is what stays. Not the words, the feeling behind them. If this resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on one conversation where you felt truly seen, and what made it different. Share it in the comments, because these patterns are how we learn what real connection actually feels like in practice. And if you want to keep building this kind of emotional awareness, stay with this journey. Because communication isn't just about being understood. It's about learning how to understand others in a way that actually changes the quality of your relationships. And once you see that clearly, you don't really go back to surface-level interaction again.